All right, good morning. So I hope you've been enjoying the conference. What I wanted to talk to you today about was where we are with Web 2.0 to now. We've had this for 4 years now. We've been tracking all the things that have been going on, an explosion of innovation in the industry. But we've also seen some other things too. The traditional business world, especially recently, has been having its own challenges while we bring a very new conception of the way that we do almost everything on the network and with our businesses. So I've almost gotten to the point where I've talked just about 2.0 because it's gone far beyond just the web itself. These ideas that are reshaping the way that we run our businesses, the way we design our products, the way we interact with our customers has gone far beyond just the internet and has spread deeply within our organizations. And we've had some challenges in dealing with that. I work with Fortune 500 companies around the world and startups, and I really noticed that traditional organizations that grew up in another era really have a hard time grappling with this and understanding these ideas and how to be effective with them, even though this is where the growth potential and the innovation lies. The folks, you out there in the audience, you're coming from both that startup space and that traditional organization that I'm talking about. I did the survey on our workshop session on Tuesday, and it was very clear there's a strong mix of both worlds in the audience there, and you both have challenges. The startup community, too, has had challenges in grappling and being successful with this. There are relatively few Facebook and YouTube stories out there. There's just a few market leaders, it seems like, in every generation. We have concepts like the long tail that says that we should be seeing a lot more success, and we are in some respects. And so the title of this session is There Goes Everyone, Everybody. Kind of a nod to Clay Shirky, as we see that some folks are having a lot of success and some are not having quite so many. So I wanted to highlight what we're seeing out there right now in the marketplace today, tell you some stories to really show you how these can dramatically, these ideas are so potent how they can affect what you're doing. So one of our big messages here is this global network that we have, the internet, the web. It's a big place today, and it's where all of the customers are. 99% of everyone you're going to want to interact with is out there on that network. 1.4 billion people, depending on whose numbers you use, and all of your competitors are there too, and they have equal access to your customers. Traditional means of market advantage, competitive advantage, things like location, simply don't matter anymore. We need new methods for gaining advantage when we play on the network, when we try and use it to develop a competitive advantage. Along the way, and we've had this web thing for 16 years, and there was actually surprisingly little change for the first 10 years. We went in every conceivable direction trying to figure out how to use this fundamentally new thing, which started as a communications medium, but has now become a true computing platform in its own right, and the dominant platform. Almost everything we see else out there, newspapers, radio, TV, you name it, is being pulled into this giant network. So all of your customers are there, all your competitors are there, and we've just now started to get smart enough. We've used this and watched what's happened in this giant living laboratory enough to get a sense of how to win out there. Just now, we're learning a lot more, though, and we'll highlight some of those things as we go through this session. So we have a few proven business models. But what's surprising to me is that because the rules online, the rules on a network, can be so very different than what we've had before, that there's almost this cognitive dissonance, this difficulty in understanding how your businesses will change dramatically, or have to change dramatically in some ways. There is that well-known saying that no small system can withstand contact with a very large system for long without being fundamentally changed. And that network is changing us, all of us. One of the things I track is Enterprise 2.0, which is the use of social media inside of organizations. And we've kind of observed that the easiest way to do it, not the best way, but the easiest way to do it is to do nothing at all. These ideas are so viral and so powerful, they come in over the network and they just spread throughout the organization. I can tell you story after story after story of companies like Constellation Energy and AOL, where we've done case studies that showed how these new applications are so powerful, they push the traditional business software inside the organization right to the edge of the network where it hardly gets used at all. And this is a common recurring theme. And we want the same things to happen for us and our products online. How do we get our products to have the kind of explosive growth we saw with organizations like YouTube, which took tiny teams and small investments compared to the companies that they were taking on, and create tremendous results, 100 million viewers on a given day, using what's essentially pocket change for traditional network companies, traditional broadcast media. So these are the kinds of effects that we want, and we're starting to learn how to do it in a repeatable way. It was interesting to see how the second generation of the web, when we look at the new fast-rise companies, they did it much quicker. This body of knowledge is beginning to spread. So most of these business models, not all of them, there's still some traditional ones that apply, and there's new ones as well. Most of these business models fit in this umbrella that we call 2.0. One of the most powerful forces is this concept of peer production. It's already disrupted 2 industries already. The software business, which most of you are in right now, this happened in open source in the 90s and the early 2000s, where we weren't sure that we could do it repeatably and reliably, but now open source is essentially the dominant model for software today. And even though we do have some very large companies that still produce commercial software, we've already seen using the power of labor on the edge of the internet, the very smart people out there, and allowing anyone to essentially walk in and contribute changes, add features, fix bugs, is one of the most powerful ways. It's almost an asymmetric model. Peer production can be several orders of magnitude more powerful than central production, and the network gives us very cost-effective and easy access to it. So this has given rise to user-generated content and other interesting scenarios, which we'll talk about as we go through this. Owning your class of data online. I find that most people don't yet quite understand that the world's largest and most successful companies are data companies now. Software is still important, hardware is still important, but in the computer business, if you can call it the computer business anymore, data has become the competitive advantage. And it's alarming. As we were talking about Tuesday, is this the new monopoly? It may very well be. And it gives us a lens, as we'll see, to rethink how we look at designing our products and services. What is the end goal here? We need to create products and services that are literally in partnership with our customers. But to create a viable business, we need to have something of value that is, because every one of our competitors is out there on the network and is just as accessible, we need competitive differentiation. The race is on to capture the leading classes of data online. The good news is, even despite 4 years of essentially the Web 2.0 era so far, which doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon, there are still many classes of data unclaimed. The principles of Web 2.0 give us that lens. They give us that roadmap to find out what's really important. We look at what the leading companies online have. They have the best sets of data, period. And instead of creating them all themselves, they're using peer production, a far more powerful means of producing value than we've ever had in history before. A pervasive network, having access to everyone, essentially, that's accessible, and then eliciting their participation in our products is the new competitive advantage. Using new distribution models. We talked a lot about building a website and driving everyone there. That's a very 20th century concept, where you build a store essentially and make everyone go to you. That's just not a really good way to distribute products. There are many new ways of getting your product, your value out across the network wherever the customers are. These are things like open APIs, widgets and badges and gadgets, which don't sound like very powerful things to drive your business. They are enormously powerful. Organizations like YouTube, where we're doing a brief case study on our workshop on Tuesday, made tiny design decisions that enabled their product to be spread by their users 24 hours a day to every corner of the network by the millions. These new distribution models are enormously potent, more powerful than having a website or building a web application. We have new product models. And it's continued to expand. Social networking applications is one of the new frontiers. The semantic web is back. One of the things I come across more often in terms of what developers want to know now today is how to make their products accessible via semantic web technologies. This is something we're not seeing. Web 2.0 happened while we were waiting for the semantic web, but that's here. That's one of the new frontiers that's coming. And then social systems. This is very, very important. Having the customers of our online products be aware of each other, being able to collaborate. These are the best ways to elicit participation. In fact, architectures of participation, which is moving to the center of product design, it's one of the new competencies all of you need to have in order to get the first 2 points on the slide, peer production and making sure you've got the best data, getting your clock started, because in a couple of years you could be uncatchable. But you have to understand how these will drive your product. And they're very different ways of thinking about where the value comes from. We actually get more from our customers than we give them when we develop successful 2.0 products of any kind. There's a two-way connection to every one of them. And they'll give often more than they'll take. So these new pull models, and that's one of the big trends that we're going to talk about here. So this is one of my favorite graphics. I put this together to try and really explain what we're talking about here. That we've come and had some seismic shifts in the business landscape in the last 4 and 5 years. With the shift from where institutions had the majority of creative control and the power to, we've seen that control move to communities of users. And the network has enabled that. In 2005, we crossed the line where most of what was out there on the network was created by us as individuals, as communities. Most of the software, most of the data was created by us. That is the first time in history. That's a major shift. And the products and communities of users doing this are the ones that are shaping our future, the future of our businesses. So we've come from this era where we've had these push business models, and we've had commercial software, and we've had traditional media, and all of these things. And we've now changed that, where literally our customers are part of the product. They're, in fact, the most valuable part of the product. This is a two-edged sword, like all technology. While you get a tremendous increase in variety and volume, and we'll talk about how this is changing everything from product development to marketing and advertising to operations and other aspects of our business. These new models are getting deeply into almost everything that we do, and they greatly increase the robustness and richness of all of these outcomes, but with also a matching increase in unpredictability. This is the things I especially talk to traditional companies, and they say, you're going to let anyone generate an advertisement for our products? Well, I don't think so. Yet I'm going to show you a couple of ways where that was very, very successful. And so we see here that this is the 2.0 model, moving away from these push-based systems to pull-based systems. Customer community relationships, open source software, social media, instead of bestseller products, focusing on the long tail, things like that can give us the results that we're looking for. So if you didn't know it yet, the core of all these 2.0 things is this concept of the network effect. We talk about different ways to build them, which is what I had on that previous slide there. The 2.0 strategies are about building a network effect. That's when a good or service has more value more than other people have it too. At some point, when you build critical mass, when you have data that is significantly better than your competitors, people simply have to use your product, not anyone else's. You have to use your web application. That's one way of building a network effect. Another way is instead of just being on your site, build APIs and appear and be embedded into thousands of other sites. Amazon paved the path for this, of course. They opened their APIs, and now 55,000 other e-commerce products use their pieces. They're parts of their supply chain to make that possible. And if we look through each one of these techniques that we call 2.0, it's about building a potent network effect. That's the new way to measure competitive advantage. But the biggest challenge here is not in the technology. This is not a technology problem, not even a design problem. It's a mindset problem. Understanding how to apply these techniques to our business is difficult. All of the education and all of the learning that we have had as business people, as architects, as developers has come up in that 1.0 world. And it can be very hard to unlearn where the value comes from or how to achieve things like network effects. So the major shifts that we're talking about here is in who creates the value. The network does, period. If you try and do it yourself, you will probably lose. I had the NavTech team. We had the TeleAtlas folks here before. The NavTech team in one of my talks at an earlier Web 2.0 Expo, they came up to me and said, yes, we understand it. We create everything ourselves, and we're going to face competitors. And they were worried about Google at the time, who were generating all the data off from their millions of customers. And they were very worried about what was going to happen there. How much control we have over our businesses. You've got to really open up, not just a little bit, but a lot, in order to effectively compete, but not open up all the way. It's about maintaining some essential control, but giving up as much as you can. How intellectual property works. One of the biggest obstacles to doing 2.0 in most organizations is the legal department. They don't understand things like Creative Commons. They've only heard about copyright, which a lot of case law has been built around it. It's very frustrating as a technical person to come up with these ideas. Let's say you actually are able to bake these into the design of your products. But then the challenges we'll have is actually saying, well, the world that we live in today doesn't really support a lot of this, particularly if we are a large organization. These great increases in transparency and openness, open supply chains, community-based processes and relationships. We've seen a lot of change. 2.0 models are transforming everything. Product development has moved to product development 2.0. I spoke at PDMA, the world's largest product development conference. I had coined this thing called Product Development 2.0 and identified what the ideas were. And the session was packed. All these product designers were saying, yes, we get that our customers can tell us what we want to do with that, but how do we listen to 10,000 or 100,000 or 1 million customers? How do we do that? Well, there are ways now. And there's organizations like Innocentive that are making that possible. Here in Europe, we had the Doritos company. You do user-generated advertising where the customers create the commercials and everyone else in their customer base picks them. It drove a 17% increase in sales that year. This year. They took the idea from North America last year and they replicated it here. These ideas are repeatable. Operations, cloud computing has been the big topic. Google App Engine is changing the way that we host and do all of the maintenance and management of our applications. EC2. I wrote a script in a couple of hours that will start 100 EC2 servers. And in 5 minutes, my entire data center is ready. That's tremendous leverage on the edge of the network if we know how to leverage the network. Customer service. Get Satisfaction is a customer-powered, a people-powered customer service site that's used by Apple and Dell and Twitter and many other major brands, so that you can listen to thousands of customers and actually support them, again, by using the power on the edge of the network to make that happen. So the big lesson in the 21st century, the network is proving to be the best solution for many, maybe even most classes of problems we have as businesses. How do we create value? Let's do it on the edge of the network. So the problem really is in reimagining our products and services for the 2.0 era. And we've got everything from the innovator's dilemma, like how do we disrupt ourselves? We have not invented here. Developers like to write code. They don't want to build everything or let other people do all the work. Overly fearful of failure. I find a lot of companies, unlike startups, are not willing to take a lot of risk. And their entire management infrastructure, their processes, and their tools are deeply ingrained in the 1.0 era. And they have a low level of 2.0 competency. That's one of the reasons I founded Web 2.0 University. Most organizations don't even know the vocabulary of any of these things. Things like network effects, which is so important, is a concept that most people couldn't define for you, yet that is the core of these concepts. So we see too many copycat products, a real failure of imagination and courage. 2.0 concepts as an afterthought. They're not when they should be the core of the product, generally. And companies that pay lip service. We see a lot of people say, yeah, we're doing 2.0, but they're not really. And they don't produce the results. And then people are unsure, is this the right, are these the concepts that make our products go when they almost certainly are. So as you all know, the 1.0 world is having its own problems. Part of it is the foundation on which many traditional organizations are based have been changed outright out from underneath them. There's been other problems too. But the time is right for change now. Learning to adapt quickly to the new marketplace realities, this is your time to say, look, we have to do things differently. Look at what's happening out there. The world's a different place, clearly. Now is the time to start rethinking what we're doing. So we now have that effective lens to do that. We have an enormous body of knowledge, 4 years of which we've collected these techniques, these ideas that power the web today. Many different concepts, and it's really this first one, the move from push to pull systems, is underpinning so many of these things. But we also have new modes of software. We always weren't sure, is it component-based design, service-oriented architecture? Well, if you look at the latest development toolkits, if you look at Ruby on Rails, you look at Groovy, you look at the cloud computing, and you look at many other things that are happening on the edge. They're highly productivity-oriented, very web-oriented, and they support many of these new distribution models. You build a Rails app, it already builds a REST API for you. You don't have to do anything else. These are many of the things you should be doing. On the left here is websites. There's all these new ways to distribute our products, but we spent most of our lives on the left-hand side. We have a lot of people who know how to build point websites. We have very few people who know how to do many of the other things. This is what we come to conferences like this to understand. And so the good news is, as far as we are into this, there's still enormous opportunity out there because we've had all of the challenges that I've highlighted here, from a failure of imagination, fear of failure, and inability to take risk. Well, now we have nothing to lose in many cases in some of our businesses these days. So it's time to change our DNA. It's almost a genetic problem. Moving from the 20th century to the 21st century, deeply understanding the network and its profound potential to create the growth and innovation that we're looking for. And it will be hard. It's not be easy to do. But the rewards will be considerable, again, for the next generation of companies. We're ripe for this. We have enough new things emerging on the edge of the network. There are still many classes of data unclaimed. There are still many product models, but we have to not look at what others necessarily have done. We can get a lot of good ideas from there, but we have to redesign our businesses from the ground up. Products and services that will then thrive in ways they never have before. Making a successful transition to the 21st century where the rules of business are different. Many companies are already disrupted and don't realize it. Certainly software and media folks will tell you that was very, very painful for them. And attaining a new sustainable competitive advantage. And this will give you resilience to future change and ongoing market evolution. Things are changing faster now online than they ever have before. It's not slowing down, and we have to figure out ways to adapt our business to this. So this is kind of the perspective we have here as we close out the first decade of the 21st century. We've learned a tremendous amount, and there are still a few more years of opportunity left before this becomes common knowledge. These ideas which will power our businesses and products will become much more widespread, and the opportunities won't necessarily be there. Thank you very much.